Welcome to Wealth Well Done. Together, we'll cover a wide range of important topics surrounding money and the impact it has on our lives. From the sophisticated and highly valuable planning techniques of the ultra-wealthy to the commonly underutilized biblical teachings. Together, we'll work to improve our relationship with money and our effectiveness in stewarding it well. Here's your host, Eric Scovill.
Hi, welcome to the 47th episode of the Wealth Well Done podcast, where we lean into the tactical, the practical, and the spiritual advice to help you do your wealth well done. Last week, we had Gary Harpst on. He's the author of a book called Built to Beat Chaos. He helped us understand more of just what it is as we see how life continues to throw curveballs at us and the challenges that we face. And it seems like we're just trying to get this one last thing sorted out, then things will be better. And he just helped us understand how this is God ordained in so many ways. And not to say everything that goes wrong is from God. Definitely not saying that at all. But also understanding that when we're made in the image of God, the chaos that He brought order to in the very beginning is similar to what we're supposed to do today. So that was those were a couple insightful interviews the last couple of weeks. And this week, we're going to switch gears and talk more about selling business. And so we're going to talk about some of the less common points in there. This is not meant to be an exhaustive study around selling a business, but more so for someone who is in the process of doing that or contemplating that. I assume that you've already done a significant amount of research yourself. And these are just some other points to help round out your study and your preparation. The Exit Planning Institute had done a study that we'll cite a handful of times throughout this episode here. But according to the research there, only 2 out of 10 businesses will ever sell. 80% of the businesses in the marketplace will not. And so what we want to do is I want to go through a few different ways to look at this. One on should you sell, what happens before you sell, and then also what life is like on the other side of the sale. So when talking about should you sell, there's a few different reasons that someone would want to do this. And a big one is taking risk off the table. 90% of a business owner, on average, 90% of a business owner's net worth is tied up in their business. And so as a financial advisor, we typically have a rule that says you shouldn't have more than 3% of someone's portfolio into a single stock. Now, when we're talking about that stock, we are talking about a one company that's listed on the S&P 500. Here in Peoria, that is typically you're talking about Caterpillar. You've got a lot of people here who have Caterpillar stock. Caterpillar did $67 billion in revenue in 2023. And so if you have a company that did 10, 20, $50 million in revenue, that is to describe the risk difference between your company and Caterpillar is it's nearly inconceivable just how much more risky your company is than investing in Caterpillar. And we would say that we wouldn't want someone to hold more than 3% of their assets into a company like Caterpillar. And so from that standpoint, to recognize the amount of risk that's in your portfolio, that's a great reason that someone would want to sell their business. And we're going to come back to this a little bit more, but not to say that just because there's risk, it doesn't mean it's bad. Cal Rickner, who's been on here before, has often talks about that faith is spelled R-I-S-K. And so being willing to take a risk, if that's where you feel like God is leading. So please don't hear me say that and say that you're too risky and you've got to sell. We're going to get into a couple more of these here. Succession planning. It might just be that you're aging out. You can't run as hard as you used to. You're not serving the employees that are under your direction and care as you did when you were running full steam ahead. And so maybe that's a good reason for you to get out there. That often, from a selfless standpoint, the timing might just be right for you to step aside. And along those same lines is acknowledging if the business needs someone else to take it to the next level. Growing a business from scratch and taking it to $1 million in revenue is one thing, but taking it to $10 million is another. However, taking it to $100 million is such a far cry from those first two options there that that's often not the same CEO. And so if you, being the founder or the CEO, when you start from scratch, you built it from, nothing to $10 million in revenue, you might not be the right person to take it to 100 million. Not that it has to get to 100 million, not that you can't be the right person for that, but just also important to understand when the right time is to step away. There's a lot of CEOs, CFOs who really find their niche where they're really good at going from 1 million to 10 million. Once they get there, they step aside and they go to the next company, or, vice versa. They're looking for a company that's, at 10 million or 100 million that's trying to go public. And so finding that right niche there where you have an expertise is a little bit outside the box, but actually allows people to really develop strength there in the specific type of growth that's needed for that phase in the business. Another one to think about is just knowing when the time is right for you, when your time is right. And this often is going to come into the idea of the cost on your time. If the cost on your time is too great, it might be family. You've got kids who are at an age where they're going to be leaving the house before too long, and you want to make sure you enjoy those last few years with them while they're still under your roof, under your direction, kind of under your control a little bit more, to make sure you build the right foundation inside of them. And so that can be important. People also often cite their health as a reason that they would want to sell the business, because the demand is just too much on the stress that it's creating for them. The amount of hours that they have to put into running the business takes away from their ability to take good care of their health. And so from that standpoint, that's another key reason that people would decide to step away. I would also challenge that if the business is interfering too much with your time with the Lord. I was just reading in Bob Sorge's book, Secrets of the Secret Place. If you've never read that book, it's not an extremely popular book, so strong likelihood you haven't. But I would highly recommend it. It has been just an absolute treasure to me as I have grown in my time with the Lord, growing in my just understanding and my seeking intimacy with Jesus. And so that book has been incredible. But this morning I was reading about basically the concept of keeping the first commandment first. And when we talk about the first commandment, the great commandment that you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And from that standpoint, the amount of time that you're pouring into the business, it's not that you're probably not going to be equally weighted between time in the business and time with the Lord, in quiet time. But if you're finding that you don't have time at all to spend with the Lord with this, or you're giving him 10 minutes a day because your business is just demanding so much of you, then at that point, I would argue that maybe you should contemplate and maybe ask him if you would be better off stepping away from that. In the book, Bob Sorge talks about the idea that people don't want to, or they get caught up in even the addictive rush of their ministry. And so it could be something that's godly as running the ministry, but even still with that, that they're focused on the second commandment, love your neighbor and to serve others. If they're more focused on that than they are with the intimacy with Jesus, with their time with the Lord, then even that needs to be corrected. And so from that standpoint, I would argue that the cost of your time as it impacts your time with the Lord should be probably one of the biggest factors here as well. And it's not that you can't run a business and have a relationship with God, but it's something that you should probably take to him and ask him to help you with this and ask him for clarity. The last one, it seems a little bit more obvious, and that might be, are you trying to capture a big payday? And nothing wrong with that at all here. Especially, and so this one's a little bit more valuation dependent, because 9-figure payday is hard to pass up, or a 10-figure, even and I don't want to judge someone else's situation here to say is 10 million a huge number or not worth it. That's not the place for this here. And let's just go ahead and say right now that anything that we're doing here, this is not to be construed as financial advice for you. And I would recommend that you talk to your own financial advisor, your financial advisory team, to make sure that what we're talking about here is something that's right for you. That being said, just some different things to consider when you think about, you see the big price tag, the big potential price tag. I'm going to pay $20 million for this business. And can you imagine if I had $20 million, that would take away all my problems? First of all, that's definitely not the case. Ask someone who has $20 million and they will tell you they still have plenty of problems. Okay, so here's one to consider here. If you have built a cash flow engine, you've built a business that does well here, and you're able to produce a pretty consistent income off of that, and you're going to trade that in for a lump sum, then that you are going to want to go and create a cash flow engine that's on the passive side. It might not be as attractive as you'd think. And so not factoring in the cost of your labor and the amount of time and effort that you put into the business here. But if you have, let's say you said example, you sold your business for $20 million and that business was able to generate for you, let's say you got a 10x multiple on your net income there. So the business was generating you $2 million a year of income. And now for you to try and go turn that $20 million into for you to try to go turn that $20 million into $2 million of annual income from investments is not as simple as you might think. And so from that standpoint, you've got to go vet new opportunities. You've got to sift through who's telling you the truth. You have to understand a whole lot more about risk and return ratios, and you're going to have to go take risk in areas that you're not necessarily trained as an expert in versus running a business where you are an expert. They often cite the idea that when you get your 10,000 hours in, and so to a business owner, to an entrepreneur who's had this business for, depending on the amount of decades you've had this business, you might have the 10,000 hours 5 to 10 times over. And so you are an expert of experts when it comes to your business. Whereas when you trade that in, just I guess consider how interested you are in the work that your financial advisor is doing. How much do you understand the investment selection that you have, why you're in the allocations that you're in? Especially at that point, you start looking at more private placements and direct investments. And so, inside that type of net worth, we're typically using real estate as a means to produce this passive income. We're using royalties. And so if that stuff is fairly foreign to you, you don't know how to vet out a real estate deal, or you don't know much about oil drilling, well, you're going to step into a new learning curve there. Potentially, you don't have to. But if you're trying to produce an income stream that's got tax advantage, similar ways that you have in your business, you're going to likely want to step into some of those alternative assets. And so with that, then you're realizing that the setup that you had before of this business that you were an expert in might be better off with you bringing in some managers to run this without you, rather than you stepping into just a truly passive form of income in terms of investments where you've left all of the area of expertise that you had before. One other fun thing that you're likely going to get into is you're going to get to find out how good the financial team is around you. I can promise you that if you sell your business for $20 million, you will find out who wants to sell you an annuity. You're going to find out who wants to sell you a permanent life insurance product, who wants to go and manage all of those assets for you, that $20 million, and move that into their brokerage account. You're also going to find out every friend who has a friend who has a really great business opportunity for you. And so just understand that with this, with the sale of this business comes other issues too. There's a really great book on the dilemmas that wealthy families face, especially wealthy Christian families. And it's by Jay Link. Jay is a guy that we had on podcast maybe back in the 16, 17 range, somewhere around that episode. But he has a book called To Whom Much Is Given. And in this, he walks through some of the 10 life dilemmas that wealthy Christian families face. And it's just, again, you might not have the problem anymore of how to feed the family or not have the stress of, is the income going to turn off tomorrow if we lose a big client? But you're just trading in one set of issues for another with us. And it's just important to understand here. But even more important than that is understand that we're stewards. They're God's assets. They belong to him. Your business belongs to him. And so anything that you're doing here should be pursued under the counsel of the Lord and what he's directing you to do. Okay, next we want to talk a little bit about what would life look like if you did sell. And we won't go too deep into this one here, but the again, that Exit Planning Institute had on their study, one of the things they talked about was of the that 20% of businesses that do manage to transfer or to sell, 75% of those owners, and the words they use here, are profoundly regret selling within 1 year of the transaction. So 75% of the people who sell, doesn't say how much the price tag they got on this, but they profoundly regret selling. And when you think about that, it's just important to go back. Some of them are now finding themselves swimming in trying to become a tax expert and a legal expert and an investment expert because they have found out that their financial team wasn't necessarily as qualified as they thought. Certainly an issue we run into fairly often with people who have sold a business and then come to us and realize how much money was left on the table because their team that presented themselves as tax experts really did not help them at all there. We're going to talk about that a little bit pretty soon here as well. So there's that side of it where they find themselves, back to a level of ignorance that they hadn't known in a long time. The other piece of this is, what will you do with your time? So when you do sell, it's kind of similar to retirement, but what will you do with your time? And if you no longer have a purpose in life, then this becomes a big problem. So where will you find your value? Another one. My guess is over half of your conversations with people outside of your family revolve around your business. And so all of a sudden now, if you've sold a business, people might talk about that up front, but that starts to talk about money, and then that's not a topic we like discussing too much. How much you sell your business for? What are you doing with all your money now? So from that standpoint, and even if you have those conversations, those wear off sooner. So you just have to understand that your identity is going to be challenged here. What will your new identity be? I dealt with this myself when hockey had been my whole life. It was everything to me. It was everything that people knew about me. I would move away during the hockey season. When I come home, all that people do to talk to me about was hockey. When I was in this new place, people knew that I wasn't from there. And so we talked about hockey. It's just hockey was every part of every conversation. And when all of a sudden my senior year of college, when that got taken from me, I went through an identity crisis. I didn't know who I was anymore because I had never been just a normal student. The obvious answer here is your identity has to be in Christ. And so sometimes selling the business may really help someone. It might not be pretty. They might have to go through some uncomfortable work, but it might help someone work through the pride issues that they had and work through the identity issues that were wrapped up in a business rather than wrapped up in their identity as a child of God's. There's a really good book that Bob Buford wrote called Halftime, and I'd recommend that one for anyone who is contemplating selling the business as well, just to put it into a different perspective here, what you're supposed to be doing with the assets that the Lord has given you. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit more about before you sell, the importance of finding the right partner to help prepare you for the sale. We've had generational equity on here before, but you could, whether it's them or any other broker, someone who is skilled in the sale of businesses, who can help you understand what it is that a buyer might be looking for and how to value your business. The average commission in the industry ranges between 8 and 12% on the smaller businesses. That starts going down when you hit $5 million and up on a purchase price. But for those smaller businesses, you can plan to pay at least 8 to 12% there. one of the important things is the business can't be about you. And so that's so often the case with a lot of small businesses, especially in the service industry. And the business can't be about you anymore if you're going to sell, because without you there, then what's left over? So what you really need to do is make sure you've built a machine that runs well without you. There's value for a potential acquirer, but not just in having all of the value represented in Jim's great reputation. It doesn't work that way. Your financial reporting and metrics need to change. You have to really start thinking through, what does a buyer want to see? So you have to look at everything in your business through a different lens. There's no longer that's just the way it is, or you can't cut yourself slack in a lot of places here. A buyer's not looking to find a break-even business. They're looking for recurring revenue. They're looking for a low accounts receivable. They're looking for contracts in place. So the handshake deals are not what they're looking for, especially if that handshake is with Jim and Jim's no longer there. Well, how valid is that relationship at this point here? Another thing that they're looking for is an intangible here are good, hungry managers that you have, the leaders inside your organization that will likely run the business when you're gone. That's a huge piece of what someone buying the business is going to be looking for. And, there are other components of the business that, while they're important, they're likely something that the acquirer is planning to fix and drive change in themselves. Healthy margins is one that's a little bit in the gray area, where you want healthy margins to show that it's a strong business, a profitable business. But that's also one that someone looking to buy your business may think that they have a distinct advantage that they can use to drive that up. So that one is important, but kind of gray. And there are other components of the business. Your supplier contracts and other things like that maybe aren't as important unless you have a real distinct advantage there. Another thing to think about when you're looking through the lens of a buyer is that you may have built your business for impact in the community, but your buyer, probably has, that's probably not what's on their mind there. So while that's highly commendable, just be aware that that's probably not something that your buyer is interested in. And so changing ownership may have a negative impact on the community, depending on what involvement you have had with that in the past. Common understanding or common saying in the industry is that one buyer is no buyer. So if you have someone who's come to you and solicited you and said, "Hey, I'm interested in buying your business," while that certainly can pan out, on average, that doesn't. That is a ploy that is used by people looking to really expose everything going on about you, drag you through a long, drawn-out process, and eventually beat you down and get you to take a much lower price than what your business was actually worth. So the goal then, and this goes back to the broker or whoever's helping you get your business ready to sell, but the goal is to create something that can go to market and encourage other bidders to come in and produce some buying pressure there. Typical roadblock to that is owners who don't want to tell their staff or their competition that they're considering selling. And there's understandable reasons for that. But the reality is it's typically good news for staff when you're looking to sell. Often the person coming in is well capitalized, and so they're likely going to have higher wages. They're probably going to have better processes and more professionalism. That might be a negative for some people who just want things to stay the way they always were. It's likely not going to be the case. But for young, hungry people who are willing to put the effort in and try to go drive forward change, they're likely to be compensated better through a different partner than they could be through you. The other side of this, though, is for your competitors. Hearing that you're looking to sell is typically bad news. You often think that these things would be reversed here, but for the competition, this is typically bad news because the buyer is likely going to have economies of scale, which allow them to perform at a higher level and allow them to have more competitive pricing than you did. They are going to be more attractive to the labor force in the area. They have more marketing and more brand awareness, most likely. And they also, probably bring a higher level of expertise, especially if it's a national firm or regional firm, they're going to have a just higher quality team on the management side that's going to bring more to the table there. The Exit Planning Institute study here pointed out that 30% of families 30% of family businesses make it to generation 2, and only 12% of family businesses make it to generation 3. And so this would be a good spot to segue into taxes. Taxes is not the only reason that happens. There's all sorts of other issues inside family businesses, and there are a lot of great colleges out there that have family business networks or even family business institutes that really help you understand more of what the dynamics are inside a family business, how to navigate those, especially one of the hardest ones is the intergenerational issues. And so that's a key component of this, but I want to focus the rest of our time here today on taxes. And so inside, when you look at why a business may not survive the next generation, if it's a successful business that's built up substantial value, taxes can be a real big piece of that. And this is especially the case in an illiquid business where a sale is going to be forced just to pay the estate tax. And so think of a farm. A farm is definitely in this case here, where if you've got 5,000 acres of farm ground and that's $50 million, well, then that creates a substantial estate tax, and you try to hand that down to your children. And how do you pay for that? So there are different tools that people use to help in these situations. One could be forming a family limited partnership, in which case you're able to reduce the valuation of the business because certain people may not have access to voting rights on it or access to liquidity. And so even if the business has assets that are worth $50 million, those shares of that family limited partnership aren't going to be worth $50 million to the holders of that necessarily, depending on how you set that up. So there are ways to do that. There are other tools that allow you to basically move assets into a trust so you can freeze the valuation. And I'm going to walk through an example of one here that I've seen how that would work here for a couple of clients recently, and that's moving the business into a charitable trust prior to the sale. And this can be massively impactful here, but there's so many nuances that need to be understood with this. So again, make sure that you're not taking this and just automatically applying this to your situation, but talk to your team. If you need to reach out to us for more information, happy to have a conversation with you about that as well. But so one example here would be a charitable remainder trust, or CRT. And you need to understand there are a handful of different types of charitable remainder trusts. There's a unit trust, there's an annuity trust, there is a flipped trust, and a what they call NIMCRUT as well. And so with these here, there are specific situations that might work better for someone's assets. But in general here, how that one could work is you can move the business into this CRT, charitable remainder trust. You can move the business into that CRT before the sale. Then the CRT pays no taxes on the sale of the business. This is a charitable entity. Charitable entities do not pay taxes here. So on the gain of the sale, there's no taxes owed. And then from that, you're able to take a lifetime income stream off of the assets here. And then upon your passing, if this is how you set it up, the remainder goes to charity at that point. And there's other ways to do this. You can set up on someone else's. You can have it on you and your spouse. You can have it on your children. There's a number of different ways to do this here to select the beneficiary of that trust. But so that's high level here. You move the assets into the trust. The trust sells the business. The trust pays no taxes. The trust pays you income off of that for life. And then the remainder goes to charity upon your passing. You're the trustee for this. If you want to be, you can be a trustee. You get to invest in almost anything you want here. And if you set it up in the way that is, you get a percentage of the trust assets every year, then as you drive up the net worth of the trust because of your investment selection, then the percentage of assets that you receive annually from that income stream just continue to go up. You have the right to choose, and depending on which of these variations that we talked about here, you've got the right to choose when to start that income stream or when to take an income. I've got some people who are looking to sell their business, but they still have $1 million a year of income outside of that. And so they don't want the assets right now, but they're going to have this trust basically rack up an accumulated amount of assets that it owes to this person. But then when they're ready, they can turn on basically like a spigot feature. They can turn it on and collect all those assets that were owed to them from before. Another great thing about this is the investments that you make, in the trust stay tax free. As in, you sell the business, but you go and invest into other stuff, and all of those new assets continue to also grow tax free. If you buy and sell, all of that is continuing to be without taxes there. And so, with that, then you're able to see a compound effect of the growth there without taxes. We're going to walk through an example here in just a second. Another noteworthy piece of this is the sizable charitable deduction that you also receive as well. So you just walk through one example here. If you sell a business for $10 million, and I'm going to talk about using the effective tax rate of 35%. Why we're choosing that is the long-term capital gains on a business. And so when you sell a business, some of the assets may be considered long-term capital gains. Some of the business assets may be considered active income. And so that is part of the negotiation process, which your CPA and your business broker will hopefully help you navigate. But so I'm using 35% as this combined effective rate, meaning a blend between the long-term capital gains rate for someone here would be 20%. And then the active income here they'd be treated at 37%. In Illinois here, we have a state tax of 5% on that as well. So that's why I'm using 35% here for easy math. But basically, if you have an asset that's worth $10 million, you move that into the trust sells it for $10 million and keeps all $10 million. And let's say you've said that you're going to have a 5% annual income stream out of that. Well, 5% of $10 million is $500,000. And so that $500,000, would be owed to you the rest of your life there, so long as the assets in the trust stayed at $10 million and you were able to produce an income stream to supplement that. Whereas if you sold the business and paid the taxes on it, then a 35% tax rate on that would take the 10 million down to 6.5 million. And it's not like you can then say, okay, well, I'm just going to go produce more income here. That's not necessarily the case. So assuming that we're still talking about a 5% income stream that you're pulling off of that asset, that portfolio, then 5% of 6.5 million is down to $325,000. And so again, depending on the needs that that's inside your family, what your goal is here, if you don't necessarily need the assets after you die and you're happy to hand them down or some of them down, then now here at that point, we can go ahead and, keep this larger income stream for you. And you just avoided taxes basically altogether for the remainder of your life. And also then for, upon your passing as well. On top of here, I mentioned that sizable charitable deduction that would come with this, and that it's age dependent, as well as some other factors, is like what type of payout you're looking to take on this. So you're looking to figure out what the net present value of the charitable gift is based on the actuarial tables for how long you're supposed to live, what your life expectancy is, and so they're going to use that to determine what the value of the charitable gift is as well here. And so that might be $1 million if you're pretty young, or if you're older and closer to your life expectancy, that amount would be much closer to that $10 million. And so from that standpoint, it's just a gift, or that's a bonus on top of the fact that all the remainder of those assets are going to be tax-free. If you've got a need to or desire to hand down assets to your heirs, or you want to have a pool of assets to use at some later point, then you could also look at using a charitable lead trust. You could do that separate, or you could do that in combination with the charitable remainder trust. That's a way that people can quite literally, they can hand down as much money as you want. If you want to hand down hundreds of millions of dollars or $1 billion, you can do that estate tax free by using some of these strategies here. So, so from that standpoint, tons of details to figure out of what it is that you're really wanting, and then the nuances of how your stuff is currently set up, and make sure that you find the right fit. But just want you to know that those options are out there for you. If you want to talk more about that, please reach out. Last, closing thoughts here, and this one is, I'm going to say is relatively incomplete, but life after the sale, and when you're in these high net worth circles, they always talk about their liquidity event. And so life after the sale of your business here gets very important to find your purpose. Like we said earlier on, 75% of sellers, have this deep regret of selling their business. It gets lonely. And what you once thought, was just extreme relevance that you had, or that there was just such a dependence on you. And when that proves to be otherwise, and the business continues to go on without you, without, undergoing some major hurdles and other stuff, it rocks people's confidence. It rocks their identity. It rocks the value that they find in themselves. And so from that standpoint, it just becomes extremely important that you get close to the Lord, that you get intimate with Him, that you are vulnerable with Him as you share how you're feeling with this, because there's no one who sells a business that doesn't go through an emotional roller coaster on the other side of that. So just want you to, if that's you, if you've already done that, or if you are preparing to go through that, or if you're getting ready to sell a business, I want you to be prepared for what lies ahead there, because it's going to be challenging, but there's nothing that the Lord can't get you through. You just have to know where to look and be prepared for it up front. So I hope that's helpful. Like I said, if you've got more questions on that, just reach out to us directly, and go to our website, storehouseassets.com, and leave a note, and we can reach back out to you there. And otherwise, I wish you the very best, especially if you are contemplating selling a business. I just hope that is exactly what the Lord is leading you to, and that His hand is on that process for you. Take care, guys.
Thank you again for listening to Wealth Well Done. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player, and together we'll continue to improve our relationship with money and our effectiveness in stewarding it well.